guys, welcome back to this midweek episode of R&D Garage. I was racking my brain on what I can do a midweek episode on next, and I just remembered that I have all these old emblems from my grandpa's salvage yard. So people always ask me how I got into cars, and I always answer them, cars have been in my blood for years and years and years, specifically because my grandfather owned a salvage yard back in, I want to say the 40s to maybe the mid 70s. And so obviously I was never there, but because of that, and he was so into cars, I don't know what happened, but myself and two of my cousins are seriously serious gearheads. So it just kind of worked out that way. But growing up, my mom would tell us stories about how her dad would bring home so many cars for them to drive from the yard, drivable, maybe not quite the safest cars in the world, but my mom's and her two siblings have driven some pretty cool stuff. So another thing that my grandpa liked to do was whenever he would get an interesting car into the lot, he would pop off the emblem to save it. And so you can imagine my family has quite a collection of these old emblems. And I decided to share them on Instagram back when the pandemic started because, it was something for me to do, a little bit of research. And then I realized this was also kind of perfect for the channel. So I'm going to go ahead. This is just a small sampling of what we have, but I'm going to go ahead, pardon my notes here because I'm not quite as knowledgeable and on the really, really old cars as I am on the newer ones. But I'm fascinated because I love like the golden age of, Hollywood, of cars, of everything. Just so beautiful. So we're going to get started. And I have to say that don't worry about squinting on trying to see the emblem right here because we're going to take a picture of each one and we'll give you a little bit more detail. Okay, let's get started. So the first one I have here is for all my Mercedes-Benz lovers. So this is actually the emblem off of a 1926 Benz. I'm not sure what model, but this is so funny because I was doing some research and I never knew what the triangle stood for, like the 3 points. And so basically the star, the three-pointed star, represents domination of the land, sea, and air. So I thought that was pretty interesting. And that's basically how this is going to go. I'm not going to give like an hour-long talk here. I'm just kind of give you a little bit of trivia about each one. So anyway, that's my 1926 Benz emblem. Pretty cool. Okay. Well, I'm guessing you guys probably already recognize this one as well. Obviously, it's off of a Rolls-Royce. Grandpa should have kept the car, but it was those days. Everything was crushed. Yeah, that hurts. But this is either off of a 1911 or 1912 Rolls-Royce. It was on the radiator. The hood emblems were very, very ornate. I don't think I actually have one. I might. I'll have to do a search for it. But this is still pretty cool. So the gorgeous R's intertwined there. Moving on. Jordan. So basically, this company was founded in 1916. They lasted only until about 1919, but let's see, they were converted to a corporation in 1919 and ran until about 1931. These cars were brilliantly marketed and were the first cars to have names such as the Sport Marine, the Tomboy, which I probably would have driven, and the Playboy. In 1920, they had this is hysterical, a Friendly 3 coupe with the slogan, seats 2, 3 if you're friendly. So I thought that was really, really cool. So thank you, Jordan. Okay, these guys I thought were also super cool. So Rickenbacker. So manufactured in Detroit from 1922 to about 1927, established by Eddie Rickenbacker, who used his WW1 94th Fighter Squadron top hat in a ring as an emblem. They built both 6-cylinder and 8-cylinder cars, but let's see. Unfortunately, they were a little too expensive, so they weren't really successful. But I gotta say, these emblems are kind of two of my favorites. They're just really cool looking. Okay, now we have Auburn. So Auburn was only around for about 37 years. They were established in 1900, but didn't actually produce a car until 1903. In 1913, they actually produced the first Indy 500 race car. In 21, they made history with the first passenger car, the Duesenberg Model A. They sold about 34,000 cars in 31. In 32, they debuted a 12-cylinder car. And in 1935, supercharged speedsters. Unfortunately, in 1937, they ended up filing for bankruptcy. But that's a pretty sick little history. Okay, here's another emblem you guys are going to recognize. A couple emblems. The Caddy. So, obviously you guys probably know about Cadillacs, obviously. But I thought it was interesting that on some of these, the ducts move around. So, on these, let's see, they're obviously almost the same. This one's missing the backing plate. But I guess on other emblems, the ducts kind of move positions. So that's the little bit of trivia for Cadillacs. Okay, now we have one called Chandler. So, and whenever I think of Chandler, I think of Friends, but whatever. So Chandler was in business from the 1910s to the 1920s. Their peak year was 1927, where they sold about 20,000 cars. They ended up getting purchased by Motors. And okay, so the interesting things about these, they were built with a metal skin around a wooden frame, and due to the use of fabric tops, after a few decades they tended to rot, which is why you've probably never seen a Chandler in your life. So that kind of sucks. Sorry, Chandlers. Okay. So now we have an emblem called, or a car called the Hupmobile. So this is actually, yeah, it's the Hupmobile. They were in business from 1909 to 1939, and in 1911 they became one of two automakers that pioneered the use of all steel bodies. The first car that had that was the Hup 32, so I thought that was pretty cool. Okay, moving on to Erskine. I think that's how you pronounce this. So Erskine was produced by Studebaker from 1926 to 1930 and cost almost $1,000. However, within a year, Ford had introed the Model A and priced that at about $525, thus undercutting the Erskine. So Erskine figured bigger was better, and they grew their wheelbase from 108 to 114. Now it was considered a large car, but unfortunately it didn't help sales. So bye-bye Erskine. Okay, moving on to Durant. So Durant was around from 1921 to 1926, and again from 1928 to 1932. Durant was funded by William Billy Durant after, oh, okay, this is one of my favorite stories. After he was fired for the second and final time as head of GM, his goal was to build an automotive corporation empire that could one day challenge General Motors. Ultimate revenge didn't quite work. You ever owned a Durant? So they're considered to be an example of an assembled car because so many of their parts were obtained from outside suppliers. So great story behind Durant. Unfortunately, they are not around. Okay. Okay, so this is also pretty cool. So these two emblems are off of a Falcon-Knight. So Falcon-Knight only produced between 1927 and 1928 by the Willys Company. They were highly regarded for their all-around performance and sales were high. But the last cars were made in 1929, after which the company switched to making truck parts. So that's why these guys aren't around anymore. And it's so funny because when you Google these cars, they do have a similar look. You know, I guess they only really had a couple ways to build cars back then and a couple models to go off of. So you either had kind of like the Model A looking cars or these kind of wild and crazy looking luxurious 30s cars, which personally I really, really like. So someday. Okay, bye-bye Night Falcon. So now we have the Peerless. So the Peerless was around from 1900 to 1931, and at the time it was one of the three Ps. Packard, Peerless, and Pierce Arrow. All high-quality luxury cars. Peerless popularized a number of innovations that later became standard, like drum brakes and enclosed bodies. Super cool. In 1905, oh yeah, this is another cool story. Okay, I love how I put super cool in the notes like I'm supposed to remember. Anyway, in 1905, they built a car called the Green Dragon, and it raced in the world's first 24-hour race. So, endurance race in Columbus, Ohio. It actually led first for the first hour, and then the driver crashed it. But ultimately, they came in third. So that's pretty sick. Very respectable. Okay, so that is the Peerless. Okay, so this isn't really an emblem, but I found it funny because it's the Triumph Sports Owners Association. And my grandpa, you can imagine, probably, yeah, he had me beat in cars owned. But again, I'm still young and I'm getting there. But anyway, among his cars, he had a Triumph. And this association was formed in 1960. Obviously, my grandpa owned a couple and was a member. Okay, so I heard it was actually a Triumph when these cars started up in the morning. Okay, anyway, I just had to show that. Okay, now we have the Dodge brothers. So obviously you guys have heard of Dodge. They're everywhere. They started production in 1900. They formed their corporation. Remember all those Christmas commercials a few years ago with the brothers racing cars and then all of a sudden they're in Challengers and stuff? Yeah, there really were there really were Dodge brothers. So they were originally a machine shop and a supplier of parts for other companies, including Ford. They actually began making cars in 1914 in Michigan. And well, you know the rest. Okay, so now we have the Desoto. Desoto Car Company ran from 1928 to about 1961, and they were the parent car of Chrysler. This emblem was used either on a 1928 to 1930 type car. The first Desoto was a 55 horsepower six-cylinder, which apparently was kind of high in those days. High performance for that era, rather. They were also made in Canada, and they had the same exact emblem, except at the very bottom, it would say Made in Canada. So I thought that was pretty cool. There you go. There's a Desoto. So you can see these are just bits and pieces of information, like little trivia. So if you guys are interested, all of this obviously is online. So, okay, this is cool. This is a Viking. So Viking was produced by GM Oldsmobile from about 1921 to 1931. Viking was actually a pretty high-priced car and was considered a luxury car. It also boasted the first V8. Pretty sick. The front seat and steering wheel were actually adjustable. So that's a pretty cool trick. I know they have those in also the early model T-Birds, I think like 50s and 60s or something like that. But it's the first time I've heard about that in like a super old car. Okay, this thing is sick. So this is off of a Pierce Arrow. And the Pierce Arrows were founded in 1901 and they ran to, they were actually founded in 1865, but they were producing cars from 1901 to 1938. Not just luxury cars, they also built commercial trucks, fire trucks, motorcycles, and bicycles. So that's pretty cool. They also had the first V12 camp trailer. So the cars got their most distinctive option in 1914 when they moved the headlights, which were on the side from the radiators, into flared housings molded into the front fenders. At night, the car looked like it had just a really wide stance. So that's pretty cool. Pierce Arrow. Whee! Okay. Now we have Hudson. So, they're slipping out. Did I get that right? There we go. So here we have Hudson. So I just hold up one. The Hudsons were produced from 1909 to about 1954. The cars went for almost $30,000 in today's money, so they weren't cheap. They had a number of firsts, including dual brakes, dashboard oil, pressure, and generator gauges, warning lights, and the first balanced crankshaft, which got that straight six engine to work at a higher rotational speed, while remaining smooth, basically developing more power for its size than the lower speed engines of that time. So, claim to fame. Okay, this is absolutely gorgeous. And I couldn't find too much about it, except that it was basically a Greek goddess, nicknamed a Flying Lady, and it's off of a 1928 Buick. So obviously you guys probably know the history of Buick, or you know about Buicks, so I won't talk about them, but I mean, how gorgeous is she? That is pretty amazing. And she's heavy. Sorry. Okay, never tell a lady that. So now we have a Jewett. So the Jewett were in production from 1922 to 1926. And in the first 17 months of production, 40,000 cars were sold, which I find kind of amazing. The first gen cars had 50 horsepower. The second had 55 horsepower. And the last, oh yeah, it was one of the last of the cars that had hydraulic braking. So, pretty sick. Saxon. So the Saxons were made between 1913 and 1923. In 1913, they offered a small two-seater roadster that offered headlights as an option. Okay. Thankfully, by 1915, headlamps were standard. Also in 1915, they offered a 5-passenger tourer with a 30 to 35 horsepower 6 with electric starter and headlamps. Whew. For about $785, which would be a hair under $20K today. There you go. So that is the Saxon. Oh boy, well, I hope you guys enjoyed this. Let me know if you did. I have a few more emblems I can definitely talk about. Obviously, I also have like Ford, Chevy, and even Honda, but I figured you guys might be more interested in the more obscure kind of emblems that you just don't see every day. But at any rate, thank you for joining me, and I hope you have a great rest of your week. Don't forget to subscribe, like, comment, and share. Thanks, guys.